All right. Here we are on Christmas Eve day. I wanted to just pop on and tell everybody happy holidays and talk about, um, try to talk about something positive when it comes to workplace bullying, which you might not, that is often a, is often a challenge. But first, I want to say happy holidays, and I wish you an immense amount of peace um, in today, tomorrow, and every day. And I also want to say thank you for everybody who has supported me this um, past year. And thank you for following me, subscribing, doing whatever it is that you've done for me, depending on what social media um, what social media program you're seeing me on. And I want to say thank you for that. But let's talk about this idea of peace and workplace bullying. Is that even, again, is that possible? Can you have peace and be working in an abusive workplace? And I think that when we think about peace, we often think about peace under the umbrella that bad things aren't happening to you. And like it or not, part of being a human being and living is we have challenges and struggles. Now, those look different depending on who you are and where you're at in the world. But everybody, no matter who you are, has some life challenges or struggles. That's part of um, being a human being. And when I'm teaching, what I tell students about those things is, you know, those challenges and those things that, conflict or are directed at your sense of self, what we do is we learn from those ideally, and we change our sense of self and our who we are as a person. And that's part of the human experience, is becoming a better person, dealing with challenges and all of those things. And one of the biggest challenges that I've gone through in my life is working in workplace bullying. And I did not have peace when I was working in bullying. But inner peace is not about not having zero challenges. Inner peace is about protecting your sense of self and not allowing those challenges to integrate into who you are. Okay. Now, sometimes that happens when you're in an abusive environment, like I was, and like many of you who are watching are. And it it becomes a daily attack on your sense of self and who you are, and it integrates, oftentimes it seeps in. Having inner peace helps you protect that, your core, if you want to use that, and it helps you, it provides a barrier around you and allows a lot of that abuse to bounce back and not affect you. Okay. Now, also, that's hard when you're in it. And like I said, I did not have inner peace, okay, when I was in workplace bullying. But I'm working on having that inner peace so that when life challenges arise, it doesn't knock me flat like workplace bullying does. So how can you do that? Okay. And this is where, again, I think when we are looking at workplace bullying, the narrative has to change about how we talk to people like you who are dealing with it. Yes, you need to document. Yes, you might need to report. Okay, those are all things that you can do on top of protecting yourself. And I'm trying to change the narrative around workplace bullying. One, to talk about, yes, people who are being bullied can in fact do that, but the first step in dealing with workplace bullying has to be protection or workplace self-defense, if you want to use that term, which is a term I'm using for talking about workplace bullying. Okay. And why that helps protect your peace is when you're looking at documenting and reporting, we have a tendency to focus all on the bully, what they're doing, and the bullying, trying to get it to stop, which is important. But we also know the reality of workplace bullying is, most of the time when you report, nothing changes. Okay. But if you look at it from your first step is to protect yourself, right? And you know, again, build that barrier or armor around your core, and then you can also do those things. So let's talk about a couple of things um, that you can do when you get back to work to help protect your inner peace. First off, if it's the holidays and it is the holidays, not if, it is the holidays, don't think about work if you have work off, okay? Just give yourself permission to take 2 days off without thinking about them, because this is your time to rebuild that sense of self in your core. Relaxing, laughing, having fun, being with people who support you and love you. That's part of developing your inner peace, okay? And you can do two things. You can say, I'm going to give myself, right? It's 12:16 here in Kansas City. You can say, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes, or I would recommend 15 if tops. But if you want to do 30, that's fine. I'm going to give myself 15 to 30 minutes to think about the bullying, to think about the bully. And then I'm going to, again, visualize yourself, putting them in a box and setting it on the shelf, right? It's not the elf on a shelf. It's your bully on a shelf, okay? Your workplace on a shelf, whatever it is, okay? And you just put it there. And then during the day, those thoughts might have a tendency to come up. And then you just think, elf on the shelf, right? I don't have to think about it. Bob's on the shelf, right? And then repeat that. And eventually, over time, probably not in the next 24 hours, but you'll think about them less because you've given yourself permission to think about them, which is okay, but you don't want it to consume you because that affects your inner peace. So put them on the shelf, and then you can, when you're going into work, visualize yourself taking them off the shelf and opening it back up. Again, then when you leave, you put them back on the shelf. Give yourself 15 minutes permission to think about them, and then put them on the shelf. So again, it's just a minor yet crucial step in developing your inner peace, is you can't be thinking about them all the time. And the other thing that you can do for inner peace is to stop focusing on getting the bullying to stop. Oh, I know that's a hard one, okay? Again, this is not something I did. This is something I'm recommending, and I wish I did. I wish I would have stopped trying to get it to stop, because that was just, for me, it was a repeated cycle of abuse. Primary trauma with the bully bullying me, right? Bystanders watching, secondary trauma. And organizations not doing anything, third layer, tertiary trauma, right? So I was in a repeated cycle. It's like I got knocked down, and then I allowed people to kick me and kick me again when I was down, okay? Because I was only focused on getting that crap to stop, okay? Again, you can do that and also do what I'm going to recommend, which is focus on yourself. Because the narrative around bullying is that you're powerless, right? And that, the only thing in your toolbox is document and report, which is a load of bullshit, if you don't mind me swearing on the holidays. There are so many things that you can do to protect your inner peace and also shut down bullying, and that's important. And why that's important is because you feel powerless when they're bullying you. Then when you just document and report like I do, again, you're just on a cycle like a hamster doing the same thing over and over. Every time you do it, you realize how powerless you are. I didn't protect my inner peace, so that stuff that they were doing to me seeped into my core. And I've had to spend the last 5 years, and probably the next 5 more, getting that disconnect, what they're false narrative was about me and who I really am. But by building a shell around your core or yourself, okay, you can help protect yourself. And so focus on what you can do. You can't get it to stop. Okay, I know that's tough. But what do you have within your power and what can you control? The only thing you can, and that's you. So you can not get defensive. Okay, stay grounded. The best and foundational move in any strategy, even if you're going to document and report, is being able to stay grounded with your feet flat on the ground, so to speak, right? Standing tall and confidently solid in who you are, not reacting to what they're doing, because your bully wants you to react. They want to poke and poke and poke and poke and poke and poke and poke, right? Because they want to see the emotional reaction. That's what they like. They think they're the puppeteer and you're the puppet. And so when they bully you and you become defensive, they like that. Okay, what you're going to try to do is cut those puppeteer strings, because you can control yourself. You don't have to react, you can respond. So think about 2 grounding techniques that you can use. Okay, you need more than one. Why? Because Bob is a real, you know what, as a bully, and he's going to poke and poke and poke. Okay, because again, if you stand solid in your grounding techniques, and they realize, something's off here and Jan's not responding like I'm used to, what then they will do is up their game. Okay, so you can again, in your response, realize that when you don't defend yourself or however you're responding, silence, right, then they're going to up their game because they need the high of the bullying. And the high comes from seeing your emotional response, seeing the fear on your face, all of those things. So you need more than one grounding technique because one might not work. Okay, I always had a few and they didn't always work. Okay, you're human. So what? Don't worry about that. Okay, if you defend yourself and you go back to your old patterns, hey, it happens. That's water under the bridge. You're not perfect, right? So don't think about, oh, damn it, Jan said I shouldn't do this and I did that. So what? Okay, so what? That's what you say. You just see me sitting on your shoulder. Jan said, so what? Let it go. Okay, so deep breathing is always a good one. But I couple deep breathing with counting to 10, because even when you're deep breathing, you're still often focused on what they're saying. And the idea of a grounding technique, at least when you're being bullied, is to distract you from the bullying. So count to 10 or 50. Okay, pick a number and just do that. And then you do it over and over, right? 1, 2, right? And when you get to 10, then you go back to 1. Okay, so count as high as you want. Maybe you could just play a little game with your bully and see how high you can count before they stop bullying you. You might be surprised you get pretty high in your numbers, so to speak. Okay, then try and focus on that. I don't recommend, when you're looking at, again, workplace self-defense, and the first one is grounding to protect yourself, I don't recommend that you do 50 workplace bullying self-defense moves. Pick a couple, right? So again, you know, I'm a girl who loves her microscripts. Again, you can go to my website and download those and get those for free. So maybe you decide you're going to pick 2 grounding techniques, right? Our first one is breathing and counting. And like one-on-one, I always did and still do when I can feel my body getting tense, is I take my, and I don't have fingernails, so it doesn't really matter, but I take my hand and I squeeze a fist. And again, it doesn't really hurt because I don't have fingernails, but it's just enough to keep me focused on that spot. And then I squeeze like that, right? You can't even, obviously you can't, I just do that, right? But it's just the idea that I'm, you know, feeling myself, I getting tense in my hands, and then I'm relaxing. If you have nails, again, be careful not to hurt yourself, but just that little sharp ding of a pinch on your skin helps you focus on that, and it takes you away from what they're saying. Again, a protection of your inner peace. I know oftentimes people are like, well, we want big things. We want to do something big to get them to, again, always the focus is on getting them to stop. Focusing on yourself doesn't have to be big things, because there are a lot of small ways that you can change how you're reacting to your bully, take it from reacting to responding. That helps your inner peace, because when you are changing, even if it's a grounding technique, and one of the things I used to do, merely because I would get bored from being bullied so long, I was able to tune some of that out. Okay, so when they were like criticizing me, I just went to my own place. I would make lists in my head. I would, do all sorts of things. One of the things I did is I listened for how I needed to respond. Okay, so I didn't respond to the bullying, and neither should you. That's irrelevant. Not really, but it's irrelevant to how you respond back. Okay, there are, again, I'm going to put a little. There are times when you might need to directly confront the bullying. Most of the time, the bullying can be a second, because you want to respond to what they're saying to you about work, because you're going to, ignoring the bullying is a strategy, because you want to bring the conversation back to work. So what I would do is I would ignore the bullying, but I'd listen just enough so that I could hear something work related, and then I would write down how I wanted to respond to the work related thing that they said. And oftentimes it's a whole bunch of bullying, one tiny little work related thing, and a whole bunch of bullying. And even if it's only bullying, you can think about the work related thing you were talking about before all this crap started. And that's then what your response is, to bring it back, focus it on work. And that is great for two reasons. Because Bob is just going to bully and bully, and he might go on for 2 hours. Okay, go, fine, do that, Bob, because I've got a lot of time in my head, and I can do a lot of things and seem like I'm focused on what's happening at work, right? I can nod my head, oh, interesting, right? Weave in a few micro scripts. But the reason it's so important to ignore that stuff, again, that's about protecting your sense of self. Plus, let's be honest, does the bully's opinion of you matter? No, it doesn't, because first off, their opinion is wrong and flawed. Let it go, okay? And second, is you're role modeling good professional behavior, not just for Bob, okay, who probably won't get it, but bystanders will see that you didn't respond to anything that Bob said, and you brought it back to the conversation. Here's an example. So let's say you guys were talking about scheduling a time for I'm checked out for the holidays myself. Okay, let's say I'm just going to use my standard one, that the budget is going to be changing, and you need to get people in the organization up to date about those budget changes and how it's going to affect their department. That's what you were talking about. And then Bob goes after you about what a terrible person you are, yada, 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 for 15 minutes, okay? Then what you say is something like this. Huh, Bob, that's interesting. Those were all interesting points. But what we were talking about, I think, Betty, can you help me? Were we talking about how we were going to educate people on the budget changes, right? So you say, oh, interesting, microscript, and then bring it back, right? It's much more effective. The other reason that that is so important, right? You're staying grounded. You didn't even flinch when Bob went off for 15 minutes criticizing you, right? Because you're letting that stuff go. You go someplace in your head. I made a lot of grocery lists in my head when I was being bullied, which was important work for me because I needed to get groceries and I don't like it. But also, so that letting those things not sink in, ignoring them basically, is helping you protect your inner peace. And then what you're also doing is then you're trying to focus it back on work, and you're being a role model for other people. And when you see Betty say, yeah, Bob, I think that's where we were. Should we get back to it? Okay. She doesn't even know it, but she's getting Bob back on track, and she's taking away some of the bullying that Bob might have kept doing if you hadn't distracted by saying, let's get back to task. Okay. That's empowering. When you see Bob squirm because he now has to go back to talking about the budget versus going after you. Okay. It's empowering to take control of the situation, even though the bullying may not be stopped. Okay. That's called self-empowerment. And it's super important in protecting your inner peace. The other thing I think is important when it comes to inner peace is believing that there's nothing you did to deserve this. That, again, this is where I think the narrative around workplace bullying is flawed, and it hurts people like you and me when we say things like, oh, Jan's a target. Well, first off, no, I'm not. I'm not an innate object. I'm a human being with feelings. The idea of target, again, you've heard me say this a million times, is that somehow, again, my authentic self came into the workplace and there's something about me. Oh, Jan's such a great worker, right? Oh, Jan's better at her job, right? All of those things, which may or may not be true and frankly are irrelevant in the conversation around workplace bullying, because what that does is it shines the light on me and who I am, rather than turning that narrative around and saying Jan's being bullied because there's a bully and a problematic person in the workplace and the organization isn't doing anything. And that narrative is bad for you, okay? Because then what you start to say is, there is something about me. Maybe you are the best worker. Great. That has nothing to do with the fact of why you're being bullied. You're being bullied because Bob's in your organization. Bob is the problem, not you. But when we have a narrative like that, you begin to think that maybe I am the problem. Maybe there is something about me. Maybe if I wasn't such a great worker, right? And what happens then is, that's false. That's bullshit. That is a narrative developed like somebody like myself, okay? When they asked me why I was being bullied, trying to find a logical answer to an irrational question, right? There's nothing logical about workplace bullying, but by God, we want logical answers to irrationality, okay? And again, that narrative is victim blaming, and then it seeps in. So not only do I think there is something about me, that's what all the experts are saying too. Okay. And I'm here to say this: there is nothing about you, nothing and no one deserves to be bullied, period. Don't let their narrative, because they can't explain what happens, okay, change or integrate and affect your inner peace. Block that crap out. You're being bullied. You got a bully in your organization. That's why you're being bullied. It isn't about you. It isn't about you. It's about that bully in your organization. And that affects your inner peace. How do I know? Because I thought those things, right? I allowed my authentic self to change because I thought there was something about me. And the problem with some of those things, when those attacks happen, it often becomes, again, what we would say in sociology is becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, right? So if you're doing paperwork, right, and you're good at doing paperwork, right? And paperwork is, is it fun? No, but we do it. And some of us are good at it, okay? But when Bob then is attacking our paperwork, we then become hypervigilant, making sure we're dotting all the I's, crossing the T's. Then it takes us about twice as long to do paperwork. And then what happens is our paperwork goes down, right? We were once great at paperwork, but because of the bullying, it changes how we work. We become hypervigilant, and then our paperwork goes downhill, and we then become what Bob says we are. And that's why protecting your inner peace and making sure that stuff doesn't sink into who you are, and you don't listen to those narratives. You have to block their narrative out. It's false, it's lies, it's bullshit, it's gaslighting. It's meant to do exactly what it did to me, make me question my reality and who I am. You can protect your peace by not allowing Bob's narrative to sink into who you are. Now, that's not easy, but you can definitely 100% do it with active, everyday conscious awareness. Okay? But it isn't easy, but it can be done, and you need to do it because you're worth it. You're 100% worth it, and you deserve to be in a safe workplace. It doesn't mean that you are in a safe workplace. It means that you deserve that. And when you think that, and you know you deserve good things at work too, then your inner peace and who you are starts to change, and you realize that in the workplace, when you're utilizing workplace self-defense, that's about protecting you and your inner peace, right? And that's what I do here at Stop Bully Culture, is help you protect yourself from workplace bullying. And yes, I also help leaders in building cultures where bullying doesn't thrive, where we can stop it and end it. And of course, my goal at Stop Bully Culture is just to eliminate bullying in the workplace, period. And I think that the first step in doing that is making sure that you're protecting yourself and your inner peace. All right. Well, I think you know that I am having my son over for Christmas Eve this evening. And so I have to do some baking. Which I'm just going to let you know, I do not enjoy baking or cooking at all, but I'm going to do it, and that's the way it is, I guess. I do want to say, though, if you are spending the holidays alone, I totally understand that. I'll be by myself tomorrow with my cats. Don't let that affect your inner peace. Right? There are lots of reasons people are alone on the holidays, and you can always send me an email at jan@stopbullyculture.com, because yes, I will be checking my email tomorrow. But if you need something, please don't hesitate to reach out. And happy holidays, and I will see you next time.